March 2020, one day we had full schools, workplaces, gyms, and spas. The next, we were all at home. So with COVID-19 and the pandemic raging through our nation, our world changed overnight. With this great pause came stay at home. And that meant empty schools. So as the novel coronavirus escalated, another dilemma erupted. Because as schools shut down, students all of a sudden didn't have access to meals. Empty school lunchrooms means hungry kids. Almost 30 million kids a day rely on school-funded programs for at least one meal a day, and that's just in the United States, which is not a country that jumps to the top of mind when we think about hunger. So it's a very, very big deal and pretty serious child hunger crisis. So Michael Rubin, who is the co-owner of the 76ers and the chairman of Fanatics, which is a major sports apparel retailer here in Tampa, he wanted to do something about this problem. He decided to create the world's largest digital fundraising, and his mission was to provide food for people who lost access during the pandemic shut-in, like the kids in need. So he started the All In Challenge. This is a nonprofit. It connects sports and entertainment figures with fans. They donate experiences like movie set visits or game visits or items like the Super Bowl rings or jerseys to raise money, a lot of money. What's interesting about this is they actually launched this nonprofit and this site on April 14th, just 10 days since the conception of this idea. So just in just a few days after that, just a few days after being launched, they had already inspired $6 million in donations. And just 2 months in, you can see on the screen, they have raised over $55 million. So it's pretty phenomenal. I believe that by growing our product mindset, we can change the way we think and we can change the world. That might seem idealistic to some, but I really love working with people to create and build products and services that people love. And I'm really fortunate to have the chance to do so. I am part of the leadership team now at Clearly Agile. We're a 100% agile company that builds our own products as well as products and services for others. We offer training, coaching, and custom services for all the way from product discovery and agile coaching to agile development and DevOps. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about product discovery. In the world of product management, it's such a very, very wide threshold into the world of product that even inside this massive bubble of product, you can have many, many specialties. And so for myself, I have a little bit of a UX background. We didn't call it UX back then, but you know, some systems design and some visual design, and so it lends itself for me to the product discovery and design thinking as been mentioned here. So I'll introduce you to some of those things tonight, and I think you'll have a lot of fun here. Instead of doing small groups and breakouts, I'm going to use a tool called Menti. So if you will play along, if you can go to menti.com, and if you can see that code on the screen, if you can't, I'll put it in the chat. We have there's some great stuff up on here. We have family time, which is pretty predominant in our word cloud, which is really awesome. I know a lot of us have been really happy to trade our commuting time for some family time. Self-care, cleaner restaurants, more time in nature, family Zooms, nice, less pollution. Think about that all-in challenge, right? It really was prompted by the pandemic. It was something that was positive. I want you to think about the elements of a viable product. I put some prompts on here, and let's just have a little bit of open mic. What are some things that, just talking about the all-in challenge, that are part of these three elements?
Contactless payments.
Contactless payments, yeah, that was definitely a big part of it. So that's part of the user experience, right? What are some other things?
Simplified, seamless experience for the user.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. What about the technically feasible side of things?
Kind of got people where they're at, right? It made it very accessible solution, I think.
Yes. And what about the scaling side of all of these technology tools that we use?
I don't know. Is everybody here using a lot of Zoom and Teams? Is that
Yeah.
yeah? A funny little story talking about the stock market. Comment on that last one. The Zoom ticker in the stock market isn't Zoom. It's something else. But there is a company with Zoom, and their stock was being bought by people who thought they were buying audio video stock. So interesting little side note. If you're interested in investing in technology, just make sure you've got the right product. And then what about those business cases? If you've got great UX and it's technically feasible, does it need to make money or does it need to serve a purpose?
Well, it needs to do one or the other. If you're in
does.
business, it needs to make money. And if you are altruistic, it needs to serve a purpose. Hopefully both.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. And you know, it's an interesting part of it because I love getting, it's a good, sort of a good meetup or lean coffee conversation about this idea of, do products need to make money, right? And so when we talk about viable products, I want to explore that a little bit tonight. So it's usable. Nobody picks up user manuals anymore. I just got some, you know, I've got quite the home office going on here. I haven't picked up, I'm not a technically fluent person, and I really haven't had to pick up a user manual, and I don't want to, right? I just past that. Even at my age, I've got some expectations around ease of use. Valuable, there has to be that value to make it a viable product, and scalable and sustainable, right? So we have to be able to build products now, particularly as you're moving into modern platforms that will scale in the cloud. That's a very big part of innovation, and speed to time to market, time to value is being able to scale technically and sustainably. Thinking about now those three elements and the all-in challenge, that story I just told you about, the donation, how important were those elements in that all-in challenge? So you should be able to go to menti.com. You're going to see some little sliders, and you can rank those elements, the importance of each of those elements, given that example. So when we talk about viability, we're really talking about that ability to make money or serve a purpose, right? With a nonprofit, you're looking for meeting this need, meeting your mission, like the All-In Challenge did. And with viability, it needs to be able to be purchased, right? Like you have to have something that's viable. You can't just have a product that doesn't make any money, because you won't stay in business. We all like getting our paychecks at the end of the day. So those two things are really important when we're talking about a viable product. The last thing is, part of viability is it performs well enough to be recommended to others. Why would I say that?
Because people trust referral.
People trust a referral, right? Yeah, you can spend a ton of money in advertising, and the dollar does not go the same distance that word of mouth does. I spent several years with Carfax, the used vehicle history company, and you know, the brand awareness was so enormous that Carfax did not advertise its core product. They didn't have to, because the dealers were advertising for them, and people were asking for a vehicle history report. So when we did build a new product, this concept of buying a used car based on the vehicle history report, there was a pivot that Carfax made during the time that I was there. That's the only time they really started advertising, was when they had a brand new product. So that word of mouth served them very well, because it was a product that the consumer started to learn to expect when they bought a used car. Forward, so we've talked about things that come out of a pivot from a marketplace. We've talked about elements of a viable product. So what does it mean when we say we want to have a product mindset? So let's get your inputs there. Just a couple of words. Value focused. Nice. User focused, customer focused. Create something a consumer can find value in. I like the way you all think. You don't need me. Easy to use. Nice. Business outcome. I like it. Client centric. Delighters. Nice. Well, you guys are setting the rest of my talk up very well, centered around a value, Customer obsession, I love that. Great. I love it. You guys are doing great. So it's a great conversation to have with your product owners to really get them thinking about a product mindset. And one of the things that's actually sort of behind the scenes maybe, but needs to be evident is the growth mindset. Has anybody considered how the growth mindset and the product mindset might intersect? Getting a couple nods. Anybody want to share a little bit about what comes to mind about that?
You have to be able to scale your product. So if it's good for just a small segment of the population, make it more universal.
You have to feel safe enough to experiment so you can innovate. Growth mindset is all about being willing to stretch without the fear of repercussion if you're, not perfect, or if something you try fails.
Nice. That's a great point. Anybody else? And so it's this idea of moving forward, right? Growth, prioritizing growth of the product over perfection. So that's really how the growth mindset and the product mindset are very closely linked. This ability to pivot, this ability to change your mind, right? And so an interesting conversation starter that I've pulled from a podcast that I listened to is to ask people, when is the last time you changed your mind? It's very interesting, right? It's a nice topic to kind of start bringing up this idea, like it's okay to change your mind, and start examining the types of answers that are coming back. And is there an element of experimentation? Is there an excelling of change, not just a welcoming of change, but an excelling of change? And then also thinking through, when you're as a Scrum Master and you're coaching somebody else, listening back to that language and hearing the messages behind what they might be saying around reticence to change, around reticence to take a chance and take an experiment. So I'm going to, as we go through here, I'm going to try to really relate it to your audience so that you can take away some of these things and explore that a little bit. But it's a fun sort of non-threatening, starter, just to ask people, when is the last thing you changed your mind about, and see what might come out. All right, so you guys set me up really well here. Great inputs. I'm gonna 3 different little how-tos on here before we get into our exercise. Identifying the problem, defining the value, and then validation. So if you are involved at all with Scrum.org or been through training in our product classes, we really focus our offering around vision, value, and validation. And that's really what this is doing. And one of the things that we talk about is that the product owner is really that linchpin, right? Product management is that vacuum between organizational management, business management, and delivery management. And if you don't fill that space, somebody will. And it might be filled with things that other people think are valuable, but we want to start filling that with things that really connect to our user, that really get that product mindset, all those things that on that last slide. We want to fill that space with things that are very real and tangible to the users. That value proposition that we talk about. It goes beyond just being a label, and start getting our product owners thinking about how they would start to do that, how they would measure that, how they would show that. I love this quote. My friend Chris Spagnoli, I always have to give him credit for this. Stop thinking about your customers and start thinking like them. Chris was one of the first people that introduced me to design thinking. He spent a long time with Riot Games and really was my mentor in the beginning in the product space quite a bit. And he just drilled this home that one of the number one traits as a product owner is that we look for is empathy. So he used to help me, interview for product owners and engagements they were working on. And he wasn't interviewing for domain experience or product background. He was interviewing for empathy. He was interviewing for active listening. He was interviewing for situational awareness, because he believed, and I've seen him work, that he can teach anybody about product management. But you really, you have to, that empathy for others is an inside journey. And so that's something that as a coach, you could watch out for. As a Scrum Master, you can watch out for and start helping people who are maybe thinking about the product owner role in a different way than it was envisioned, more about the tangible part, like the backlog management, help them thinking about problems they're trying to solve. That's something that you can do in your language and push that on a little bit more. The things, I am a huge fan of design thinking. What we know for a fact is companies outperform everybody else. So I want to give you a minute here and look at that list. This is from 2016. I was trying to see if there was an updated slide to this, but a lot of these are still relevant. Anybody here have a favorite on the left? A favorite? Anybody have a loyalty?
Starbucks.
Starbucks, yes. Let's be honest. I'm in that club.
Target for sure.
Tell us a little bit more about that, Stacey.
Oh, well, they just have good products. I mean, good design. It's laid out well. It's better quality, good prices. I mean, what's not to love? I mean,
So why would you go there versus Walmart? If all
Walmart.
things were equal, what would be the differentiator for you? If price was equal, if distance was equal, what's the differentiator?
the difference is that Target has, their products are more stylish. They're more up to date, like current, trendy. They seem to be better quality. I mean, their prices are probably a little bit higher, but just better stuff in general, better selection.
Great, thank you for that. Anybody else? Any others?
Disney.
Disney. Eric, tell us about Disney.
Just the experience, I think, is kind of second to none. Going there with my wife and I, as fun as that's been, I think what gets me every time is just kind of watching my daughter experience it, and just kind of the awe of personalizing the experience and making sure everyone's taken care of, and if anything goes wrong, making sure that no matter what, they'll make sure that they're taking care of you. So it's very experience and customer focused, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, Julie, I would add on to Disney because I have been there, just me and my husband, and I have taken my mom, who is 70 years old. We took her by her, just the three of us. And then I have taken back then he was 5, my 5-year-old son. And every time when we go, the experience is phenomenal. And irrespective of the age, we all seem to have tremendous fun because it's so focused on variety of people. Doesn't matter which age group you belong to, there is something for you there. And we never left unsatisfied. So I vote for Disney as well.
Yeah, phenomenal.
And we can't leave out the fact that Disney was responsible for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Hello, the greatest thing in all of cinema. Maybe.
Thank you. And so, it's interesting. I live here in Florida. I'm not an amusement park fan at all, but I am a huge Disney fan. And actually, the purchases of Marvel and Pixar really affected me because what I saw when they invested in those brands was diversity and inclusion, right? So that was a big risk for Disney to explore those worlds. It's very very far away from the princesses that my daughter grew up with, right? That we started to see, African American in Black Panther. We started to see women. We started to see this in these big blockbuster moves, heavy investments. These were not B movies that they were putting out. And so I'm a huge fan of Disney because of their ability to pivot and to pay attention to the world that we want our kids to grow up in. And even if you don't have kids, just the influences in pop culture that they have. And so that's what made me a fan of Disney, was watching those big risky moves, as they moved into modernize their offerings. So we're all talking about some emotion. Do you guys feel that emotion that's coming out? Yeah, could you see yourself having this conversation with your product owner and tapping into some emotion about the thing that they wanted to build? Maybe bringing up these ideas of these, companies that evoke emotion, features that evoke emotions, just having a conversation and remembering or getting them to remember what draws people to product, right? That what really brings loyalty is the emotional side of it. So, while the world was learning all about how to make decisions and how to negotiate. You know, there was a guy over in Harvard who was building out all of this research around the way that our brain works. And he won a Nobel Peace Prize for it. He's actually got a Nobel Peace Prize for economics, I believe. But what he really proved was that emotions is actually a form of thinking. So we make emotional decisions and then we justify them. So how many of you have bought something that was probably not the wisest purchase and then justified it? Has anybody done that?
Guilty
Yes.
as charged.
Yes.
Only all the time.
Yes, this is a very, very, very common thing. And he proved that emotions are a form of thinking. And so we want to tap into those emotions because people will buy a product, change their behavior, or use a service more when you are solving a pain point than they will for pleasure. So just consider that. Those are conversations that you can start bringing up with your product owner, just getting them thinking about that empathy and that emotional side. All right, my next favorite here, Seth. Anybody get Seth? If you don't get Seth Godin's blog, it's a nice little, quick little blog every day. I'll give you a minute to read his quote. Don't find customers for your products, find products for your customers. So this is really tapping into this outside in thinking. I can't tell you how many companies, you know, they've done a feature. This is a very typical story. They've created a feature for a customer, a big customer, probably the customer that's paying most of the bills. They've created this feature and they think it's a great idea and they want to market it and nobody else wants it. That's an example of inside out thinking, right? When we sit around the table and we plan something and this is a great idea, but it's so customized or it's such a niche thing that they can't really make it into a commercial product. This happens quite a bit. So when we switch that on our head, we start thinking about outside in thinking. We're going out to make sure that there is a problem that needs to be solved by a larger audience, because you don't want all your eggs in one basket. It's a kind of an obvious statement, right? But it's so often we get into this trap of, you know, customizing for the one customer that's, you know, the bread and butter customer, and then forgetting about that scalability and sustainability that we need to see. Now, this as an Agile coach or Scrum Master should really speak also to your engineering side. I was working for a company, fantastic company here in Tampa, debt-free, $85 million revenue, debt-free, fantastic business model. I always say if Silicon Valley finds out what they're doing, they'll be here to put some competition in place. And they really wanted to get to $1 billion in revenue. They were 14 years old. They had 44 years of technical debt. They were drowning. They were strangled in their own technical debt. So when I talked to the salespeople, they said that their competitive advantage was being able to customize for their customers, give their customers what they wanted. Has anybody ever heard this? Now, if I went and talked to the engineering lead, what did they think about that strategy? Anybody here have an engineering stint to their background or?
Unsustainable.
Unsustainable, right? So even trying to map out their systems, they had a whole team. They had a whole Six Sigma team try to map it out and they couldn't do it. Their code was literally spaghetti code. So when we talked about decoupling code and being able to get features out there and being able to respond to market shifts quickly or other requests or use a feature for multiples, we literally could not do it. And so this is where, as an Agile coach, you can even get your Agile engineering experts to start thinking about, you know, Agile is not just in our practices and in our Scrum events, it's also all the way down in the Agile engineering side. And so tapping into that art of the possible is also another aspect of the product mindset and getting everybody involved in some of that solutioning. One of the things I think is difficult is this value conversation. What is valuable? Because we think it's a great idea. Like, your baby's ugly. One of the things we've been fortunate about is that a company named Bain has actually codified value. And I want to introduce this to you, and then we'll go back to our interactivity here a little bit. I'm just going to put a little snippet up here. I really encourage you to go out to either Harvard Business Review or just Google the Bain value pyramids, and you'll notice something as we build this. So the very first level of this Bain value pyramid, this is a business to customer, so a B2C model here. They've got both a B2B model and a B2C model. thinking about the sort of lowest layer of value, they've identified this idea of functional elements. Now, anybody recognize any elements on there? Anybody do anything in those spaces? Building any products or services in those spaces? Buying any products or services or apps?
It was the old drivers in project management.
Yeah, yes. And I used to say this all the time. I need to build something that's making money, saving money, or delighting the customer. That was sort of my road, right? So making money, saving money, that's right there. I thought that my value conversation started and ended with making money, saving money, and delighting the customer. So it turns out you can go a lot further. So this conversation really changed my questions and my conversations. So I know for myself, I'm a list maker. I've got a ton of organizational type skills. I use a to-do list. I use my calendar. I use a ton of stuff around organization. Surprisingly, my husband still thinks I'm not organized, but I try. So I use a lot of things around here. The next layer is this emotional need, tapping into an emotional need. Now, does anybody here have anything like an app on their phone around wellness or therapy? Yeah? It's actually a trend. If you go out to look for trends right now, I think trendhunter.com, mindfulness apps and meditation apps are a huge trend right now. So people are actually making a ton of money off of wellness apps and therapeutic apps. Anybody have something like a Fitbit or a Google? Yeah, lots of these, a big market out there. Tapping into an emotional need from people and even thinking about that attractiveness. Again, this is just a snippet. They have something like 40 different categories. Thinking about attractiveness as an element. Victoria's Secret, their business model is based on attractiveness, right? So it sort of gave me permission for me and my clients to think about expanding that value conversation. It didn't have to stop with making money, saving money, delighting the customer. It could really tap into what is the element of value that we're really focusing on. And so it helped me push that conversation. And as you might notice, I'm going to put this next animation up here. We're going up and we're building a pyramid. So now we're in this life-changing layer. Does this pyramid remind anybody of anything? Think back to your school days.
Maslow.
Yes, it's loosely based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I just really think it's a brilliant way to display thinking about value and quantifying value, if you will. Probably qualifying it first, right? Clarify what matters, qualify it, and then you can quantify it. Thinking about affiliation, right? Is there anybody on this call that's a Dallas fan?
Cowboy Stars.
What happens, to a Dallas fan when a game comes on?
I actually work at the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm at the office with the field.
There you go. I love it. Yay. Nicely done.
We'll need tickets for everybody.
Yeah. What happens when a game comes on? Business as usual. People are multitasking. What happens?
The world stops.
The world stops. Now, I grew up in Idaho. We did not have our own football team. My dad was a huge Dallas fan, and so I've been a Dallas fan all of my life. Even though I lived on the East Coast and, married a Pittsburgh fan, and then I lived in DC, and then of course there was the Redskins and the Dallas games, right? But my affiliation goes back to that emotion that I had when I was watching the games with my dad. It goes all the way back there. And so it's really rooted in my affiliation, my feeling of belonging is really rooted in those emotions around there. And I am waiting for Fitbit to come out with a mocking and ridiculing app. Like my motivation, this it's time to move. It's time to, it's not working for me. So if anybody wants to up the edge on the Fitbit app, let me know. I'll work with you on that. So what do we think is at the very top of this pyramid? Anybody remember Maslow's hierarchy?
Self-fulfillment?
Yes, exactly. It's this idea that you will pay more for a product or you will change behavior, using a service if it's tapping into something that you care about. So let's be honest, does anybody have something like Tom's, 40 Oceans, anything that Rothy shoes, Bomba socks, lots of shoes and socks in this space? Anybody know these products? They're products when you buy one, something happens. If you buy that product, which is extraordinarily expensive compared to other products of the same quality, there's something else that's happening. Anybody know?
They're donating to a cause.
They're donating to a cause. So when I buy a pair of shoes that's made out of recycled bottles, plastic bottles, and I'm paying something like $120 for them and are not that comfortable, I'm wearing them because it's giving back to a cause that I care about, and I get to talk about it. I'm an environmentalist. So when somebody talks to me about I don't have my bracelets on because they clank all the time, but my husband wears about 12 of these plastic bracelets that come from 40 Ocean because we donate to 40 Ocean, and he wears them because he's a sailor, and it opens up a conversation about a cause that he cares about. So we'll put our money in the causes that we feel the most about, and as you can imagine, right, it taps into that self-transcendence, that self-actualization. Anybody have a product like that in their life?
I have the 4 Ocean bracelets too.
Nice. Yeah, great. You guys, how do you feel about this? Do you feel like you tend to spend more or are more apt to buy when it taps into those motivators? Do you recognize this? Yeah. So how could a product owner use this? How could you coach a product owner to use this? What would they do?
Well, I think it forms your purpose, right? Your why, right?
Yes.
I think that's so important. And I emphasize that with my product teams as well. Is like don't focus on the shiny object feature. Like focus on business value and like what's gonna cause people to come to your website or buy your product. So you need that why.
Great. Yeah, I love that. And so we can go, show them this chart. Is a beautiful, interactive tool online, but just get them thinking in more detail around the problem that we're solving, the emotion that we're tapping into, and they have to do that by leaving their desk. Well, it's virtual now, I guess they can do it from the desk, but they've got to connect with their users, right? Because otherwise, if you're not talking to the people who are using your products, what might happen? If you're just making something that you think is a good idea, at the end of the day, have you built something that taps into your users' motivators or your own?
You might have built the wrong product.
Yeah, we have a confirmation bias. We're built with a confirmation bias that we cannot deny. And so I'm an environmentalist, right? If I have a choice, I'm going to do any kind of, feature that ties back into the things that I care about. But maybe my user doesn't care about that.
Hey,
And
Julie.
so yes. Mm-hmm.
So some of our heroes are people like Steve Jobs, who just had this incredible gift to understand what the market needed. So at some point, I'm sure he said, man, I think this is a great idea. And somehow he validated it. So do you have any hints on how we could say, I think this is a great idea, but I need to validate it?
Yeah, you're setting me up for the rest of the talk. Yes. Can you hold that for just 2 slides so we can get to that?
Sure. Thanks.
Nice. Well done. Good setup. So anybody else?
Do you think that putting yourself in the place of the consumer, if you are a consumer of the product, you would tend to be a better product manager for that product because you're a believer in the product? Do you think that's true?
Yeah, it's hard for me to get behind something that I don't feel passionate about, right? So I really want to tie into that. The easiest way for me to tie into it is just to sit and talk to my users. go observe, like get on a screen share if it's a digital, go and watch what they're doing, because then I can tap into their problems. And as a Scrum Master or coach, you could also lobby for your developers to have time with your users. So typically we find that we might not be asking the right questions when it comes to getting our users at the table. I used to just really push for this conversation about getting access to my users. I would have account managers or salespeople. They didn't want to give that access. They didn't know what they were afraid we were going to do, but they wanted to be the proxy for the user. And if you've got nothing else, it's a good place to start. But I found by asking really creative questions and maybe looking at other elements that the company has, that I could tap into some users in different ways, like call centers. Call centers or support teams. They're pretty close to the user, yeah? Training centers. If you've got any kind of simulated training center, you've got people coming and using a product for free, maybe while your own people are using it. Often, if you have a universal product, there's people inside your own company who are users. And so I used to say, well, I want to be able to get a review and be able to, demo my working software at the end of my sprint and have these great reactions. And then somebody said, what if your user could demo that working product at your review? And that ups my game, right? Like bringing my user up front into the planning and into that review, like getting them thinking about them demoing and how it would solve their points versus me showing it. That really kind of ups my game there.
Julie, in the old days, we used to say, don't start the project without executive support, executive sponsorship. That was always the big rallying call. I think these days you need the executive support, obviously, but I think one of the things I always want to make sure of, do I have access? Does the team have access to the customer? If they don't, are you really going to be successful?
Yeah, it's a great point. So be creative. You may be coaching this and prompting this and you get a no, but there could be lots of ways to access data or get a lot closer to your customers than we think. So don't let the immediate answer stop you. At one company, it took me 2 years to get a user at my review, and it was absolutely worth it, right? But by thinking about all of the different verticals in the company and who's doing what, I could tap into other areas that I could bring into my team, and close that gap. I'm always trying to close that gap between the development and the user. So be creative about that and where you're asking your questions and how you can get your hands on any kind of data. We typically have more avenues than we think. Okay, so let's check in. We just went through this value pyramid, so just to bring it home a little bit, thinking about that all-in challenge, let's go to our mentee and let's reflect which elements of that value pyramid were the most evident in the all-in challenge. Yeah, I think one of the reasons why it was so successful, that was just a phenomenal amount of money in a short time, is because it touched on so many of those elements, right? Obviously was connecting fans with experiences in a time where we didn't have any sports, happening. And so, a lot of affiliation that was happening there. People could be very close to other communities or people in their lives who, did have a scarcity with food. And so tapping into that social impact or even an emotional, the hope side, life-changing. I think that's one of the reasons why this thing was just so vastly successful so fast, because it really tapped into all of these different elements. So I'm wondering for myself, what if I started measuring the impact in these paradigms instead of just an NPS score, instead of just saying, would you hire us again? What do you think? Give me a rating, 1 to 10. What if I started really tapping into these different layers of value and exploring, how many of those layers I could really, really get to show up in the features that I'm producing? And what would that look like? What would that look like in a product strategy if I really used value measurements as a driving factor for decision making? All right, I just want to throw that out there a little bit. So let's go on to probably, I'm going to call him the greatest of the greats, the greatest of all time. Just love Marty Kagan. If you haven't read his book, Inspired, if you do want to coach product owners, or if you're even exploring the product world, I think his book Inspired is a textbook. around product management. There's another great book out there, The Professional Scrum Product Owner. That is another great book for product owners. So if you're new to the product world and you want elements that you can really grasp and coach, fairly easily, those are two great sources. So if you're in that Scrum space, that professional Scrum product owner is a great space. If you're in a more of a product-oriented space, I would lean on Inspired for a little larger conversation. And this kind of taps into, was it Red who was asking about Steve Jobs and not knowing what customers want?
Well, as far as I have this great idea, how do I validate it to make sure that I'm not creating the product for me and I'm creating actually for an audience?
Yeah. So what is happening? What are you guys using?
What's it, Bo?
Like other than a standard feedback loop, or?
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of techniques might you be using to validate that you're building the right thing?
Usability studies.
Okay. Before or after it's built?
As it's being built.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. I'm going to tap into you. We'll use your insights as we go through this next little section.
A lot of the stuff I'm working on right now is direct to consumer, so the results are pretty immediate. You either make money or you don't. Now, there's probably a view on that in terms of, are you making healthy money? Like, is it high margin money? But a lot of it's like, if we spin up a website, are people buying what's on the website?
Nice. So I love some of the things that Marty talks about. He talks about this aspect of missionaries versus mercenaries. Has anybody ever heard this conversation?
Mm-hmm.
See, what does a mercenary do?
Mercenary just cares about the job, right?
They do what they're told.
Mercenaries fight for money.
Yeah, they do what they're told. What does a missionary do?
They are selfless, usually.
Serving.
They're serving, yeah. And he talks about needing more missionaries in this field and less mercenaries, right? And so he even will go so far as to say, like, focus groups don't help us anymore. And so what really helps, and this is where it ties into Agile frameworks and Scrum, is to show people something and then to get their feedback. So let's explore this just a little bit. I want to just change that language from validating the outcome to validating assumed change in behavior. That's really what we're validating. And I would go so far as to see if you could prompt your product owners, if they're thinking about MVPs, to think about them as minimum viable prototypes, not minimum viable products. It's a small nuance, but if you start talking about experimenting in prototypes, it starts changing some of that thinking, some of that product mindset into a more temporary, more imperfect try at something, right? Just by starting to change the language. So this is typically what happens. We get an idea or an ask from a customer, where we have an idea, and we want to deliver good customer service. A lot of times we're pretty good at things like visions and story maps. I love the work that Simon Sinek and Jeff has done, Jeff Patton, and story mapping. We do these minimum viable prototypes. You might even be really good at short feedback loops and small little batches and getting it out there. It's just pretty typical. I think because of those big, great names, we've done a lot here on the left side of this line around the idea, the vision, and that story map is getting to the why, getting to the purpose. Do you think we could go any further? What's happening here is every time you go up one of these areas, when you go from idea to vision, right, you're making an assumption. And you're going from vision to story mapping, you're making an assumption. The same thing when you start to build. The further that you go up, you're building on a group of assumptions, and they're growing and they're growing. And at the same time, you're spending money. You're spending effort and time, which is money. So you've got this increasing level of effort at the same time that you're increasing your assumptions. So one of the things we'd like to coach people to do, to pause and do, is really think about all of these different ways that we could start to think about the problem fit, the discovery. And there's more than one. There's probably 3 times this many. There's so many different validation techniques. We could probably do a whole meetup just on exploring validation techniques. There's great resources out there. I lean on Eric Rees and with Lean UX and Lean Startup and I'm going to say his name wrong, Jeff Gottschall, I think his name is, with Lean UX.
Getzlaff.
Say it again so I can say it right.
Getzlaff, yep.
There you
Jeff
go. Thank you. We have a great new class in Scrum, this Scrum with UX class, which really explores this, right? And so we don't have time to go into each one of these tonight, but it's a great body of knowledge out there around discovery techniques, and they are in order of effort and assumption. So something as simple as observing and interviewing can give you a lot of insights. I had some friends that just went out to a grocery store. The problem with their software, the store was not, the self-service on the store was not recognizing most of the grocery bags. So the whole self-service was just kind of falling apart. They couldn't figure it out why. They did all kinds of stuff from their desk. They went to the grocery store, and within about 45 minutes of watching what was happening, they knew what was happening. Every time that somebody bought some groceries and they used the bag that was sold at the grocery store, it worked fine. But anytime they had a grocery bag that didn't fit the exact dimensions and weight of that store's grocery bag, the algorithm was off. Very, very, very easy to fix. Probably would have been impossible to figure that out if they hadn't just gone and observed it. It would have been really difficult. So a quick trip, a quick observation, they were very easily able to see what was happening by recognizing those patterns. So we could go on with some examples here. Does anybody know the Dropbox story? Yeah, anybody use Dropbox?
I use them. I'd love to hear the story.
Yeah, he went from 5,000 users overnight to something like 70,000. Let me look at my notes here. 75,000. He went from 5,000 on his wait list to 75,000 with a 2-minute video. Now, Dropbox was invented by a guy who was going to a meeting on a bus and he forgot his thumb drive. Right? So he started designing this solution, Dropbox, on the bus. And so he had this basic solution. It wasn't going to work for all platforms. It wasn't going to work on the Mac. It wasn't going to do a lot of things. And he just built a 2-minute video. We call them explainer videos. He posted that video, went from 5,000 to 75,000 overnight because of a 2-minute video. So imagine what he knew when he going to bed one night, wondering if he had a viable business idea, waking up the next morning with 75,000 people on the wait list. Do you think he felt like he had a viable product? Pretty good evidence for a 2-minute video, and it's still out there. You can search for it, search for that original explainer video, and they still use a lot of videos today. So anytime they launch a new feature, they use a lot of videos. Another pretty famous story is the Zappos story. Does anybody know that story? Somebody's nodding. Stephanie, Blake, yeah, tell us that story, Blake.
What? I know how long when I get picked to tell the story? Okay.
Yeah, that's how it works. We're all friends here.
Yeah. So yeah, the interesting thing that he did was he started by just going to shoe stores and taking pictures of shoes and like, hey, if you like these shoes, I'll go get them. So he didn't have the inventory. He would just go get the shoes at the shoe stores. And that was how he started off. Was that the kind of main point you were looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we call that the Wizard of Oz technique. So the user doesn't know that there's a man behind the curtain, right? It's not transparent to the user that there's something happening behind the scenes. We call that Wizard of Oz, and it's a great way to validate something, with a smoke screen or a storefront. And they don't know what you might have a ton of. I was working for an insurance product company. We just built the finance in the spreadsheet, put out a false storefront just to see if insurance agents would buy this product. And then we had to do the manual financing side, which they were great at. It took a long time, but it was enough for us to know that we had a multi-million-dollar product viability. So very, very easy to put up, sort of in a way, a smoke screen, right? But a lot of work behind the scenes, but they knew then that they could pivot, get this product out there and meet some regulatory deadlines. And they knew that they would have a viable product from just a quick, short experiment. The difference between Wizard of Oz and Concierge, in Concierge, people know that something's being done that's not an automatic thing. So just want to point that out because it's often confusing to people, the difference between Concierge and Wizard of Oz. So just think about those words. The Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. A concierge might be you might be testing something in a user experience lab, or artificial intelligence or natural language recognition is one that's kind of famous for that, where people knew that it was happening and they were tweaking it as they went along. So that's the difference between those two. So I really encourage you to help your product owners and your teams think more about this minimum viable prototype. A lot less development, a lot more discovery. I want to leave a little bit of time for our little discovery technique, so I'm going to skip this question. The point is, if you're not doing discovery, you may be creating waste. It's really what we're trying to get at, is by tapping into all of these things. We are identifying the problem with some discovery techniques. We're really changing the conversation around value. We're really breaking the bias towards our own confirmation bias and building things that we know our customers will tap into by building empathy. And then value is only an assumption. We don't know anything really about value. Steve Jobs was taking a great risk, right? And he was willing to do that to find out if it actually would be validated by the market. He knew that he was tapping into something, but he knew that it wasn't without risk. So that's what happens, is that the market will tell you, somebody on this call said it, like, you get feedback right away. And the world's moving too fast now to spend too much time in development if you don't know that you are building the right thing. So I love this. We're going to go into a very, very quick little exercise. And I just like this statement. An outcome, we're always talking about outcomes. An outcome is a measurable behavior, measurable change, right? So you should be able to measure an outcome in some ways. And so there's a lot of work that's out there around outcomes or objectives and key results. And so we want to go beyond, making money, saving money, delighting the customer, and push a little bit further to think about those outcomes and those benefits. Okay, I want to ask you now at your desks if you can get, if you've got stickies, if you're Agilist, hopefully you have stickies. If you can get 2 colors of stickies, that would be great. We're going to do a quick exercise. We're going to just do this at our desk. So I'm going to walk you through a little exercise. All credit goes to Teresa Torres. She's the one who introduced this. She did a lot of work with Spotify and some others. Another one with a great blog, does a lot in the space. So you might look for her stuff. I'm just going to give you a tiny bit of her exercise called the opportunity tree. All right, so I want you to think about an idea, something that you want in your life, in your personal life. An example might be you want a new house, a better job, more leisure time. Go ahead and write that down on one color. I have pink with my little idea, so write down the idea, this thing that you want. Try to make it something that's real for you, not like world peace or cure for COVID, but something that's realistic for you. Okay, everybody have that? So now, if you had whatever you wrote down today, I want you to take your other piece, your other color sticky or your other notepad. I have my little heart here. If you got that thing, this thing idea that I wanted, if you got whatever you wrote down today, what would it do for you? What would be the benefit? So for example, if you got that new house today or a better job today, why would you be better off? So that's what you're going to put on your other sticky. All right, I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. So you should have 2 stickies next to each other, or your 2 pieces of paper. In my example, I'm going to say, okay, I want to buy, for some reason, I know a ton of people who bought a house in the middle of COVID, which was weird timing for me, but whatever. Some reasons I heard, maybe they wanted to feel more grounded in the community. Maybe they wanted to have access to a better school. Could be any kind of, maybe be closer to home. There could be all kinds of reasons. In my example that I gave here today, Michael Rubin wanted to build a fundraiser. He wanted to feed people who lost access to food. do we have one or two people who would just share what they wrote down? Any brave souls?
Julie, I can go, Julie.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, my big idea is cooking robot. All right, and the reason why I wanted that is it saves time, especially when I'm in time crunch. Healthy eating all the time, variety when I needed it, and we don't waste a lot of money and money and time eating out. Sometimes we end up eating unhealthy food, and just for fun.
Okay. All right. That's good. Thank you for that. So if you think about that, how many other people started writing down their benefits and started to get a couple of them? Did exactly what she just did. Yeah? Anything wrong with that? Is that a good thing?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I mean, I think I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Maybe not. What if we put our other hats on and we really tried to think about what could possibly be maybe a slight negative?
Losing focus, maybe being more functional than self-transcendental.
Maybe. It's pretty common. We're really good at it, especially that getting back to why. I hear somebody off mute. You want to add something?
Maybe we only achieve one of those and not all of them. So maybe we don't feel successful or fully satisfied with achieving that goal.
It could be closer, right? You could dive right in. And so what happens, remember that neocortex in our brain, we make emotional decisions, and then what do we do with those emotional decisions? We justify them. What are we doing? We're falling in love with our idea. And so we're really good at figuring out these benefits. And so we can make these long lists of benefits, right? And they might all be great. But one of the things that happens is that we're starting to feed that confirmation bias. And then we get into something and we have sunk cost and we don't want to back out. So I want to show you a little bit. And again, all credit goes to Teresa and her group. If you've got those two things next to each other, now I want you to show you the hardest thing that you're going to do all day. Take that benefit, right? The thing that you would benefit from your idea should be on your right side. This is all you're going to do. You're going to move it to the top. Everybody have that? All right, now I'm going to ask the question. That's your benefit, right? How else could you get that benefit? And start writing those down. If I bought a house and I would feel more grounded in the community, now I'm going to flip it and I'm going to say, how else could I feel grounded in the community? Anybody have anything they want to share? I saw a lot of head nodding when we asked that question. What happened? Any pivots?
This is good stuff, Julie.
It's a little light bulb, right? It's my all credit. All credit goes to Teresa Torres. It's the most brilliant question, the easiest, most brilliant discovery technique you can do with your product owners or your dinner companion or your family, right? Because what happens when you say, how else might I solve this problem? Anybody?
Because I opened up the example, I'll go.
Okay.
So some of my ideas are hire somebody to help me with cooking, prioritize cooking in my daily schedule, and plan for a variety because that's something that I miss. So plan for it beforehand, and get help from my family. Those are the different things that I can do differently.
Yeah, phenomenal. And most of those probably would even have other benefits. Right. So as you start building this out, you can almost start building. Yeah, you can almost start building what she calls the opportunity tree. So, in this instance, to feel grounded to the community, maybe somebody could become a community volunteer or school volunteer, or maybe they could start or join a nonprofit, or maybe they could just hold a porch party with masks. Right. So just by flipping that on its head and saying, how else might I solve this problem? Now, instead of justifying something that we're falling in love with, we're making this long list of benefits. We're starting to open up ideation. We're starting to think about all the different things that we could do that could get us a little closer to that end game, but maybe without so much investment. And perhaps if you did some of those smaller MVPs, minimum viable prototypes, you would get validation early on if you're on the right space or not. Might change your trajectory, even in life, right? Maybe volunteering sounds like a great idea, and then you get into it and you can't stand it. You don't know. So as she builds out her tree, she's starting to literally build it like a tree. You might have some other people, as you build this out, do this in groups. You might have some other benefits that come out, and those benefits don't match. And we call that framing the problem. Because when you really start opening it up to understanding what's the problem we're trying to solve, you want different of opinions, you want different outcomes to start coming out, and you can start picking the thing that has the most value. And now go back to that Bain pyramid and build that value proposition and go up the pyramid higher and higher. Very, very little investment in time, right? You're starting to make assumptions. You just frame and reframe. You can do this with groups. You know, start with a small group and keep framing it. Maybe you start to build out even your own life, things that you can do, you know, that you can control in your own life, and look at different ways that you can do some things in probably a lot faster and a lot cheaper than going to the end result. It really might change your whole trajectory, right? Just like we expect our product people to pivot, we're just asking the question, how else might you get that benefit? And then going all the way down, I want to just throw this out here, one thing she points out. You might have some great ideas, but they don't have a good outcome, right? So maybe you have an existing backlog, and maybe you want to go help your product owner organize your backlog in this way, and you might end up with a bunch of good ideas, but they are not tied in to any kind of objective or outcome. And so this is a great way to visualize an existing backlog and see what kind of bloat you have in there. Somebody's just great ideas. So you can use that whether you're designing and developing a new idea, or whether you've got something that you just want to bring some order to. I just push you to her work. I think she's done a fantastic job. I hope that this was something of value to you. So ID the problem, frame the opportunity, define the value. And is anybody here working with OKRs? Anybody? Yeah. How easy would the OKR conversation be if we started thinking about it in this way? Because you can see that. Anybody see epics, features, and product backlog items?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This is such a valuable exercise. And then, as always, invest in validating that outcome. That'll be another meetup. Today, we've got our takeaways, right? So vision, value, validation. Always try to visualize your thinking so other people can critique it. And I just want to leave you with your all-in challenge. You've got this, hopefully, these little ideas and benefits. If you could take this and think about your own world, maybe there's something that you can do, especially now, prompted by the pandemic and all the opportunity and the need that's surrounding us, and think about the things that bring you into your joyful space. Those things in the value pyramid that really speak to you, the thing that you wanted to do. Maybe it's a big game, you know, maybe there's a big thing out there that you want to do. But if you start using this and you start thinking to yourself, how else might I start getting that benefit? You may be surprised at how quickly you can make change in the world around you.
Julie, thank you so much. I don't know whether you're watching our chat window here. So you've been, there's so much praise that's coming out, and you know, you've definitely enlightened our DFW community, our Agile community. There's so much takeaway. Of course, you know, I had so much fun exploring my cooking robot idea. By the way, if it comes out, I'm buying it for sure.
Right? You better go trademark that thing, right? I cook.
I loved it. I loved it. So thank you, Julie.
Yeah.
Connect with her, follow her. She is a product genius, like you can see today. You know, I've been inspired by Julie's work for such a long time now. So
you're so kind.
So Julie, thank you so much for sharing our meetup today. And thank you so much for your valuable time. We truly appreciate your presence and your wisdom that you shared with all of us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.